Well, JORASANKO is a, I mean, you could call it biofiction. It's biographical fiction. It's based on the lives of the women of the Tagore family and on Rabindranath's children's generations. So actually I've brought out the characters mainly of Mrinalini Devi, Kadambari Devi, Gyanodhanandini, Swarnakumari, mainly. And the book is based on authentic documented facts, but reconstructed imaginatively. I mean, it's sort of seen through the light of the imagination. So there is some fictional element in the book, but basically it's based on facts. Yes, it flows as a story because, you know, what I've done is I've taken a certain period, about a 50-year period, beginning from 1859, when Gyanodhanandini, the second daughter-in-law, you know, whose husband was the first ICS of India, Rabindranath Tagore, when she comes to JORASANKO as a bride of 7. And then it's really her story which has been taken through, but then other stories have been woven into it, because it's about what happens in the family during that time, both public events and private, you know, interactions between the members of the family, etc. So it does flow as a story because it has a clear linear, you know, flow. Well, I have always been interested in women's issues in the first place, and I've also been very interested in the Tagore family. And the problem with, you know, whatever is recorded about the Tagore family, particularly for people who are not Bengalis, you know, they only know Kadambari, and they only have a very warped notion that it was a big love affair between her and Rabindranath, and that is when he got married, she committed suicide, and that is not supported by facts. So I wanted to paint a really correct picture of of these women, and they were all very important women in their own right. You know, Kadambari, as we know, was Rabindranath's poetic muse. Gyanodhanandini could be called the first modern woman of India, not even Bengal, of India. You know, she gave the women a new way of wearing a sari. She introduced the idea of the nuclear family. She was the first woman to go to the governor's, the viceroy's at home all alone by herself. So she gave, she was a very dynamic character. And the strange thing is that she is not remembered by history. And I thought I should give her an adequate space in the novel. Mrinalini too, you know, because she was so shy and retiring and so she was kind of lost in the shadow of her illustrious husband. But she also contributed quite a lot to the family and to Rabindranath's work. Maybe not to his writings, but to his work for Shantiniketan and his work for the estates, etc. So I thought that the truth about these women should come out, and should come out supported by actual authentic facts, but yet made into an entertaining reading, which would, you know, flow smoothly, and that's why I thought of making it into a novel. Well, you know, all these women have written something or the other about themselves. Amar Sriti, Amar Jibon, Sriti Kotha, etc. Something or the other. Everybody's written. And of course, there are other. Rabindranath himself has made some references to what went on in the Andur Mahal in his memoirs, you know, like Chele Bala. But the trouble with these people are that they were extremely reticent. You know, they just stated facts. They didn't. They were never supported by the emotions, passions that must have accompanied, you know, the events that they recorded. I felt that that's why I felt that it worked better as a novel. You know, just as a piece of biographical writing, it would be very dry, very sketchy. So what I did was I not only read between the lines, but I also, you know, the imagination took over in a big way. So where there was no context, no time frame, no set of characters, so to speak, when just one single line described a certain event, I have sort of fleshed it out in my novel. You see, the research element was quite a lot. It took me nearly 2 years to do the research, the basic research, because I had to read, I had to access all these women's writings, and most of them are lost or just buried somewhere or the other. So that, and plus I did other related, read other related works, you know, biographies of Rabindranath by various different people, and tried to tried to literally, you know, dredge whatever little I could find about the women, which was very little. So it took me 2 years to do the research, and about 1 year to actually write the novel. Well, before I answer your question, I'd just like to tell you that actually this kind of work, you know, has not been attempted, not in English and not even in Bangla. This kind of work, because writers are generally very, most writers, Bengalis, are a little anxious about, you know, what they say or what they don't say about the Tagore family. Tagore family is kind of deified in the imagination of Bengalis, and I felt that no, I wanted to, you know, give readers the truth about the family, and there are in fact a lot of things which maybe some people would have left out, but I haven't, you know. For instance, Rabindranath emerges as an extremely complex character. Like he has some excellent qualities, but some pretty, you know, negative qualities. And I have not been afraid to bring them out in the novel. For instance, Rabindranath. Rabindranath has always been looked upon as a Mahorshi, you know, the great almost saint and sage, and we've all even call him Mahorshi. But there were some very, very negative elements in his character. There were a lot of contradictions in his character, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. You see, on the one hand, he believed in women's education. He insisted that all the women in his family, girls in his family, daughters as well as daughters-in-law, receive a basic education. But he was also very keen on keeping them in the Ondur Mahal. You know, so there was this contradiction, and in fact the problem with educating women and then keeping them in the Ondur Mahal, I think, makes life harder for them than otherwise. That's one example. Another thing is that though we call him the Mahorshi and we think of him as the sage and saint who meditated in the Himalayas and all that, he was a very, very shrewd person in terms of, you know, money and things like that. You know, there was his father, Dwarkanath, left him one of the properties, number 6, Dwarkanath Street Lane, and left another son, the number 5, and the third son, who was childless, he left a piece of land and some money. Now, that son died fairly early in life, and the widow naturally expected that her husband's portion would come to her. But when, you know, the family split, and you know about the Brahmo Tagores and the Hindu Tagores, so when the family split, then Rabindranath and this youngest daughter-in-law, Tripura Sundari, who was Nagendranath's wife, you know, to whom the land and the money was left, she wanted to adopt one of her nephews and kind of leave him her portion. That time, Rabindranath actually filed a court case and demanded that she should neither be allowed to adopt nor should she be allowed to inherit. So, and the case went on for a long time, and finally the verdict came. She was not allowed to adopt, and whatever that her husband had inherited was to be divided into 3 portions, one to Rabindranath, one to Girindranath, and one was left in abeyance that we'll see. I mean, give us time to think about it. And later on, when that money, when the verdict really came in favor of Tripura Sundari, he practically forced her to give up her rights. He gave her an annuity of 1,000 rupees a year and 10,000 flat, and said, now you give up your right. So he was this kind of, you know, a very shrewd, practical man who wanted, you know, who realized that he had so many sons and he had to leave them a certain paternity. And on the other hand, he was a sage and saint meditating in the Himalayas. So this is a kind, this aspect of Rabindranath has not been brought out by anyone. The full story is in the book. Well, about Kadambari, there is this a very widely prevalent notion that that there was a love affair between Rabindranath and Kadambari, and that she killed herself because, I mean, she committed suicide because after he got married. But that isn't supported by facts, as I said earlier, because for one thing, Mrinalini was only about 10 years old at the time that Kadambari killed herself. She couldn't have posed a really serious threat. And for another, she herself chose Mrinalini. She and Gyanodhanandini chose Mrinalini as Rabindranath's wife. There were other reasons. There were lots of other reasons. One was, of course, her husband's indifference to her, and really the most immediate reason was that her husband had bought a ship, and he was taking it for the ship's maiden voyage, and he had promised to come to JORASANKO and pick her up and take her himself. And she was all dressed and ready and waiting, and he didn't come. The ebb tide had run out, and he couldn't reach. And in a fit of, and in a fit of whatever, Obhiman jake amra boli, she committed suicide. And this fact has been recorded by Indira Devi Chaudhurani. But barring that, I think a lot lay within her own character. She was a kind of depressive. She was sickly, and she had tried to commit suicide once earlier. So there is a streak of melancholia in her, which made her react, very sharply to everything. She was deliriously happy one minute and sunk in the depths of gloom in another. So this is another fact that I wanted to correct, and that's why I wrote at length about Kadambari.